If you work with someone and they've done an excellent job, then of course you want to recommend them, you want to advocate for them, you want to be a champion of their work. And there's also, I think, a hot debate in customer marketing of should we reward people. I do want to reward people, but I don't necessarily want them to advocate just because they're getting something on the other side of it. How do we convince our customers to become brand advocates? It's a great question. And I actually think we don't convince them. I wouldn't want to convince them. I think that advocacy is the result of getting value out of something, right? If you buy a product, if you work with someone and they've done an excellent job, then of course you want to recommend them, you want to advocate for them, you want to be a champion of their work. And so I think instead of convincing, it's more about how do we help customers to solve their problems? How do we invest in them personally and professionally? How do we build a relationship with them where it becomes natural that they want to advocate for us? And then it's about establishing how do we want to ask people to advocate for us, right? How do we actually activate these advocates that we've already invested the time in building? When it comes to how we incentivize and reward advocates for their advocacy, I think it really depends, like anything else in our industry. So, different customers have different types of gifts or limits that they can receive. They have different policies, and so we want to be mindful of that. And there's also, I think, a hot debate in customer marketing of should we reward people. Obviously, we want to reward people for their time, their effort, but do we want to tie that to advocacy? So I'm a big fan of not necessarily promising that we're going to do something, deliver something upfront, but then just rewarding people. And then it's just kind of an above and beyond thing. So I do want to reward people, but I don't necessarily want them to advocate just because they're getting something on the other side of it. That said, sometimes it is something that's maybe built into contracts, renewal negotiations, things like that. But for the most part, personally, my philosophy and stance is I do want to reward advocates in a way that makes sense for them, in a way that works with and abides by their company's policies. But I also don't necessarily want that to be tied to the advocacy where it's just a quid pro quo. I want them to want to advocate, and then I would like to reward them generously when they do so. My best piece of advice for companies wanting to start a customer advocacy program is to start by investing in your customers. So before you can ask people to advocate for you and do something on your behalf, you have to do something for them, right? It's that give and take principle. So how are we helping our customers to meet their business outcomes, to solve their problems? How are we making them look like superstars? How are we investing in them personally and professionally? And then we kind of earn the right to ask for acts of advocacy. And from there, I would think about a couple things. One is, what do we really need or want people to do? There are so many options for advocacy. What is actually going to be most impactful for our business? And then I would also think about how do we make sure that we're not asking the same people? I think that's a trap that a lot of companies fall into, is asking the same customers over and over and over and over and over again to provide a reference or to do a case study, to get in a webinar, to give product feedback, right? Anything they're doing for your business is an act of advocacy. And so we want to make sure that we are paying attention to who's being asked what and putting that tracking in place early on, just to make sure we're not inundating customers with requests. So those are some tips, best practices for where I would start, how I would get started, some things to keep in mind. I think I'm going to get a few groans and eye rolls when I say this in terms of what tools are we using to manage and track customer advocacy. And when I tell you it's right now, it's a spreadsheet, right? It's a lot of manual tracking and spreadsheets. And I think a lot of us start this way. It's how we manage our programs in the early days. Because even though a lot of these tools are relatively inexpensive compared to the rest of a marketing tech stack, we're still just getting started, and we're proving the value of a program. We're building out something more robust. And until we have something that is more robust, it maybe doesn't make sense to purchase a platform, right? A dedicated platform, because that's a lot of work, right? If you buy a customer advocacy platform, that is someone's job then to implement and manage that platform and to ultimately be able to achieve ROI on that. So we are using spreadsheets, and then we're building things into Salesforce, which is where our account management and sales teams are, so that they can track the work that they're doing and how it ties to our advocacy efforts. So if you're in that world where you're working from a spreadsheet or you are working in Salesforce, don't worry, you are in very good company.